To say I'm not scared of death is an extreme understatement. I'm actually terrified of that. But I can't control when that's going to happen. It's all in science's hands at this point. And what I don't want to do is, if I get to that point, I don't want to look back and say I wasted the last year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever that is, because that will be my biggest regret. And it would be my biggest regret as a father, as a husband, and just as a human. Like, everybody has the stopwatch above their head, and some might be shorter than others, but I'm going to maximize every day I can, and I'm going to do whatever I can to enjoy it. So in early in the year 2021, I had my gallbladder removed, for non-relevant to this story at all. And then in May, I started to have abdominal pain again, very similar to when I had gallbladder issues. So I was coaching Little League Baseball the night of May 4th, 2021. And then as the night progressed, the abdominal pain just continued to get a little worse. So much so that my wife kind of forced me to the hospital in the middle of the night on May 4th, May 5th. And I went to the emergency room. They did a quick CT scan and found a blockage, or I'm sorry, a mass in my colon. And they did a couple other tests, blood work and stuff. And they said that they were going to be prepping me for emergency surgery, that they wanted to get that mass out. As they kind of did some more digging and research, they also found several lymph nodes that were impacted, as well as 4 lesions on my liver at that time. So that's kind of whirlwind of how we got started. Went through that emergency surgery that night and was in the hospital for about 11 days. Yeah, so I was diagnosed with stage 4 colorectal cancer. I went to the hospital. This was during COVID times, right? So nobody else could come with me. I went by myself. I was in the emergency room by myself, and had to make that call to my wife that they found a mass. And even at that point, I still really didn't comprehend or kind of grasp really kind of what the situation was. I was just thinking, okay, they found something, they got to get it out, and then I can go home and kind of move on with life, right? But obviously that wasn't the case. So for me, it was very shocking initially and almost kind of numb, to be honest with you. It wasn't until, after the surgery and I started to recover in the hospital that kind of things became real of, my situation, the diagnosis, and the more and more doctors that I spoke to while I was in the hospital, they didn't necessarily paint a real great picture of, the survivability and, how long I would be around and, all those things. And well, I was told that, obviously 41 was very young to be diagnosed with this. And, they mentioned that they're seeing more and more of this and younger patients being diagnosed very late stage. Obviously some of the traditional symptoms like, rectal bleeding, abdominal discomfort, those types of things were pretty common. But for me, I really didn't have any of that, other than, like I said, the gallbladder pain that came back. And I thought it was kind of strange, obviously, because you shouldn't have pain in an organ that was removed. So I just thought initially, I thought it was maybe some type of surgery complication that turned out obviously not to be surgery complication at all. It was a whole other issue. Of all the chemo that I've been on, that first line treatment was pretty rough, right? So FOLFOX, not for the faint of heart, a lot of fatigue, a lot of nausea. We did add Avastin into the mix as well, just to kind of hit it harder, I guess is probably the best way to describe it. And we kind of talked through, side effects and what to expect over these 6 months of what that was supposed to be. And the whole intent was, curative intent, and to get me to a position where I could be surgical in regards to the liver situation. So we went through the full, 4 months of FOLFOX before I was able to actually have my liver surgery. So they did a liver resection in October of 2021 and took out about 30% of my liver. And the good news is most of the lesions that were in the liver were actually necrotic at that point. So chemotherapy, knock on wood, had kind of done its job. And then, recovered from that surgery. And they did ask me to complete 4 additional rounds of kind of cleanup chemo, just to make sure there wasn't anything kind of lingering out there that didn't show up on the scan. So, I left the hospital in October there extremely excited, right? You get this diagnosis 6 months before, 4 months before, pretty dark picture, right? And to be told that, hey, we got it all. And, in my mind, I beat it and we're moving on with life, right? We can kind of go back to normal. So about 2 months after that, kind of a follow-up CT scan, they found numerous spots in my lungs. So it had kind of hid for a little while and then metastasized further into the lungs. And that's what we're still working on treating today. I looked at it as kind of 2 things, right? There's the physical piece, which, there's a lot of medications and vitamin supplements and things like that I was taking to help, right? But honestly, I think the first year of this was more challenging on the mental side, if I'm being honest. And, it was pretty dark for a while for me, because obviously the first thing most people do anymore is you grab your cell phone and you grab your computer and you start searching, right, of, your disease, and you want to learn more about it. And, the prognosis for a stage 4 colon cancer patient is not real great. And, I've got 2 young boys, my wife, we have a great family. And to think about losing all that in a very short window is very humbling. I guess is probably the best way to say that. And, I went through a pretty dark depression phase where, kind of lost hope. I did seek out some professional help from a therapist standpoint, and that helped me tremendously. Not only just be able to be able to take the feelings that I'm having at different points throughout the day or the week or whatever, and kind of work through and process those to kind of get me back centered, and to be able to be present instead of just kind of sheltering away, if that makes sense. That traditional model of, men don't cry and keep your feelings in and, walk it off, rub some dirt on it, right? That's just kind of, it's just kind of culture, I guess is the best way to say it. And, when my wife and I had a lot of conversation about the depression piece and the diagnosis, and it's great to be able to talk to friends and family, but there's a component that a professional can bring to those conversations that friends and family can't, right? Friends and family will tell you, you got this, you're going to be okay. We're going to get through all those things, right? And it's all in good intention, but the professional side will actually take you through how to deal with the dark stuff, right? And how to work through those, and how to deal with anxiety, and how to deal with depression. So you can actually enjoy life, and instead of just living, secluded and isolated and things like that. And I did find a couple groups shortly after my diagnosis that really helped me with the kind of like peer-to-peer, patient-to-patient, sharing stories and hope, and just kind of avoiding that isolation piece and being able to talk to people that truly understand, what I was going through. I think it would be remiss if I didn't mention a couple groups that helped me tremendously through this diagnosis. One of those is obviously colon cancer specific, but it's a group called Colon Town. And it is an organization, nonprofit organization, that focuses on patient and caregiver-led support, education, and being able to share stories and speak to people that are going through things that you're actually going through. And then the other group would be Man Up to Cancer, and this is a all cancer type, but specifically for men. And we touched a little bit earlier on that stigma of male and mental health and isolation and those types of things. And that group is phenomenal at helping solve that gap, and really providing support and help for patients, men specifically, to not isolate during these times, and how critical it is to not do that. And, as a cancer patient, being able to, quote unquote find your people that are going through this with you. It's amazing the connection you can make with people, whether it be online or in person, that are going through things. And it's almost a bond that's stronger than any relationship I've had, that I've known people for years and years and years. I don't know if it's a trauma response or what it is, but it's interesting to be able to surround yourself with like-minded people in similar situations, and you just feel some of that weight get taken off your shoulders to some extent, when you can share and know that people get it. Honestly, as a father, that was the hardest conversation I've ever had. And, my wife and I, we talked a lot about this before we, informed my kids about, what approach did we want to take? At the time, okay, 2.5 years ago, they would have been 9 and 11. And, you think 9 and 11-year-olds are pretty young, but, kids are smart. And, especially with technology at their fingertips, they're able to find the answers if you don't provide them. So we made the decision that we were going to be age appropriate, open and honest with my diagnosis, my condition, and just kind of how life is going to look for a while. And, I look back on that and I'm really glad we made that decision, because as I've met other folks that are going through similar things that chose a different option. And again, every family is different, and everybody's decision on how they include their family in these conversations is something very personal. But I've also seen a lot of family and friends kind of be torn apart simply because they felt things were hidden from them. And I wanted that to be the same voice. I wanted them to be feel like they're part of this story, to feel like they're part of what we're going through and not just dismissed. And, even 2.5 years into this, I still double down and think that was the right decision for us to do. As for, my extended family, or, my parents and in-laws and stuff, we needed a lot of help right in the beginning, right? So this was right at the beginning of school summer break when all this happened. And my kids are extremely active in sports and activities. So, me being out of the mix for a while, recovering from surgery, we needed a lot of help, shuttling kids here and there, and, just dealing with life, right? It doesn't stop just because somebody gets sick. So, we were able to have a lot of conversations and tough conversations, right? But at the same time, as family does, there's a lot of hope and a lot of positivity and a lot of support that comes with a lot of those conversations. Yeah, so I had about 2 months, and it would have been January, February of 22, till that March, April 22, that I didn't have, quote unquote, residual disease or anything, and nothing showed up on scans. And then what we monitor, we use a couple different tools to monitor my disease, right? So obviously blood work is pretty traditional. And then we also use ctDNA testing to monitor residual disease. And that's actually what kind of gave us the smoke alarm, was a test called Signatera. It actually posted positive. So it obviously sparked a flurry of emotions and feelings, that it's back. And because of that positive test, my medical team obviously ordered scans and so forth. And at first, nothing showed up. So we were kind of at this weird, we know something's there, we know something's brewing, but we just can't see it and we don't know where it is. And, I'm really lucky in the aspect of the medical team that I have and my oncologist. We kind of walk through different options. We could do nothing, and we could just kind of wait to see what pops up and then deal with it then. Or I guess what is not very common, I have learned, is my oncologist actually offered me to go ahead and start back on treatment again, knowing that something's there, it's going to show up, we just don't know when. So while chemotherapy is not fun, we opted to go ahead and start treatment, to be as aggressive as we possibly could. the ability to bounce back was so much faster. When I was on my first line treatment with FOLFOX, after that infusion, I would be kind of out of commission for like 4 or 5 days in a row, and just miserable, just like the worst flu possible is the best way to kind of describe it. And then when I moved to the second line treatment, it was more of a, infusion day after was pretty rough. And then, you started to come out of it pretty quick. Um, and that cycle was every 3 weeks. So I actually got an extra week of good feeling into that mix too. So again, no chemo is great, it definitely was good from a quality of life perspective. And then about a month after that is when they did a follow-up CT and then found at currently 14 spots on both sides of my lungs. Obviously we had that tougher conversation around curative intent versus palliative care. And, I still joke, like I'm still on a curative path. Like I'm not ready to succumb to that. This is gonna be my life forever. And I know that seems kind of silly at times, but I think for me mentally, like I need to know that curative is still a path. So, hearing that was obviously frustrating. It was discouraging, but, I feel like we were in the right place to get started when we did. And like I said, that cocktail worked for about a year and a half. So again, maybe I'm an oddball, but we're in this kind of weird situation where we know the chemo that I'm on wasn't reducing anymore, but it was keeping things stable. And I've also learned I have to accept stable as positive. But we had that conversation around, okay, well, if this drug's no longer shrinking, but it is holding it stable, is it best to stay on this until it stops working altogether? Or do we want to go ahead and fast forward a little bit and jump on third line treatment? And again, the path that we've always taken is the most aggressive path and the best probable outcome. So we made the decision to go ahead and jump ship and start third line treatment, which started about a month and a half ago. Because I'm still in active treatment, I see my local team every 2 weeks, and we complete scans every 3 months. My hope is it can get me to a point that surgery would be an option from a lung standpoint. But obviously it's got to do some good work. I will say that the positive is that after 2 rounds of this, I just had my third, but after 2 rounds of this, one of the tumor markers in my blood is the second lowest it's ever been. All of the spots in my lungs are very, very small, and they're all under a centimeter. So for me to get in any clinical trials, I don't qualify because they're not big enough to biopsy. So I'm in that weird situation of you almost want it to grow to be able to qualify for trials and things like that. But mentally, I can't accept that. So I'm just going to continue to beat it down until I can't beat it down anymore, right? So it's indefinite right now. But the good news is that I have found options post this line of treatment. So obviously exiting standard of care. There's a couple clinical trials that I've already kind of looked into and tentatively been approved for. And then also pretty aggressive opportunity that's being tested in a NCI center close to me is a actual double lung transplant for metastatic cancer patients. And that tumor board has already approved me as well, but I have to exhaust, traditional standard of care, which is the current treatment that I'm on now. I don't want to take anything away from my team because they are great. But at the same time, there's a realization you have to that comes into reality of you're not their only patient, right? And they're not going to invest, 40 hours a week looking into different options for you and so forth. So, I've learned a lot through a couple advocacy groups that I'm part of that has really helped me understand the value of second opinions. And for me, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh opinions. And I've traveled quite a bit to get a lot of better understanding of options that are out there and things that are at different cancer centers that I can't get locally. And that has helped me a lot, open up some doors and again, continue to build that hope strategy around there's something else after this. instead of just saying, hey, this is the last standard of care line. This is it. Like, there's plenty more options out there as long as you're willing to, one, do the research and find them, and then two, as long as you're willing to go wherever it takes to get whatever that treatment may be. I think a big misunderstanding, and again, it is not the fault of your local oncologists and teams. I think it's just how the systems are built. You have to be a component of your care, and you have to be an advocate of your care, but that also comes with education. I had this misunderstanding, not necessarily misunderstanding. It was in my mind that I would just go to my oncologist and they would take care of everything, and that, they would prescribe, here's what you need to do to get rid of X, Y, and Z, and then things would be great, right? There are limitations, and there's limitations to every cancer center that's out there. Some specialize in the cancer you have, and some don't, and for me, knowing that I'm not going to get this, here's a list of trials that are all, across the United States for you to look into. They provide some that they're familiar with, but ultimately a lot of that research lies on the patient, along with opinions. And I can't stress enough, exhaust your options in regards to opinions. There's never too many opinions to get, and there's never too many places to visit to get ideas. My chart is a blessing and a curse at times, because obviously you have access to those scans as soon as they're available, right? So sometimes I see them before my own oncologist would see them. And when it's a good scan, that's great, because then you can just kind of high five and move on about the day. It's when it's not good, right? That's when the panic sets in of like, okay, do I need to call? When are they going to see it? What's our next step? So the scanxiety piece, how I've learned to deal with it. One is you just have to accept it. And that sounds really weird, but you have to accept the situation you're in. You're going to get good news and you're going to get bad news. And more than likely, you're going to get bad news more than you get good news. So I think with that mindset, just not expecting to go in and, oh, everything's going to be great and the scans are going to be clear, right? Don't set yourself up for something that's not realistic. Helps a ton. And then let yourself be surprised when there's some good news and actually enjoy that. And again, when it's not, learning how to process that, going back to, seeing a professional that can help with tools and tips and tricks to kind of work through some of those things has helped me kind of post-scan, right? Be able to kind of control some of those things. I stopped working at my diagnosis. So we were lucky enough in a situation that I could step away from work, and we can kind of live our lives pretty much as normal as we had. And I know that is not the situation for a lot of folks, so I don't take that lightly. But what it has allowed me to do is to spend my time how I want to spend it and prioritize my time very differently than I did in the past. And I think a lot of folks, you fall in that, work is always kind of like this big rock that you always got to spend time on. And then, you get home and you got kids' activities and all these different kinds of things that just kind of consume the day, right? So with me not having to work, I've been able to spend time with my kids that I never would have had the ability to do. One of the things that I'm most grateful for is the last 2 summers. Obviously our kids would go to some type of a camp or care or whatever, when I was working. But since I've been home, we didn't have to do that. And I was able to stay with the boys both summers. And they coined the term Summer of Dad. And what they would do is they would take a calendar, just a plain old calendar, and they would just start filling it with all these activities and stuff that they would want to do throughout the summer break. So my job was to find ways to get all those things to happen over the course of, 65 days or 80 days or whatever it is. But it has been so much fun, and it's been so rewarding to be able to spend that time with my kids, and my phone's not ringing. I don't have to worry about email. I don't have to worry about, the grind of a traditional job. It's just, I'm able to spend my time how I want. Don't give up hope. Number one, absolutely educate yourself on your disease and be an advocate for yourself along with your care team. Be part of those conversations. Don't just let those conversations be done to you. And take your life back. I think to say I'm not scared of death is an extreme understatement. I'm actually terrified of that. But I can't control when that's going to happen. It's all in science's hands at this point. And what I don't want to do is, if I get to that point, I don't want to look back and say I wasted the last year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever that is, because that will be my biggest regret. And it would be my biggest regret as a father, as a husband, and just as a human. Like, everybody has the stopwatch above their head, and some might be shorter than others, but I'm going to maximize every day I can, and I'm going to do whatever I can to enjoy it, whether that be enjoying my own hobbies or spending time with my friends and family. But I'm not going to let it take that part of my life away.